Guys, ready for a tale of tragedy and comedy?
Yes, I love
All right,
this
here we
story,
go.
man.
He says, I apologize in advance. This is not a story that will earn me a place in the regiment. Hop has certainly helped me a lot, but I can't credit him with saving me from self-deletion. Instead, I hope that this will help other dudes in hard spots in their lives. I'm a millennial, born in the mid-'80s. For the first 5 years of my life, I lived with my parents in my maternal grandparents' home. When it came time to start school, my grandparents sued for custody of myself and my younger brother due to what we'll call parental incompetence, and they won.
Good.
From there on out, they were our lawful guardians. From them, I learned how many things, such as discipline, dignity, and attached to dignity is the ability to suffer in silence. In almost every respect, my grandparents had more right to call themselves my parents than my own bio parents did. However, despite being fit and strong all his life, my grandfather was a long-term sufferer of the diabetes.
Mm.
Was blind, couldn't feel his hands or his feet, suffered from numerous health ailments,
Oh,
and in the late 90s, his kidneys failed. He was kept alive for a few years on dialysis, but amid all the other health problems associated with diabetes, he eventually succumbed in his early 2000s in his sleep on his bed in his house. The night he died, I had to come down to his room to help him off of his commode and into his bed, and the last mortal thing he ever said to me was that he was proud of me, and I'd grown to be a strong young man.
Hmm.
The moment my grandmother, one of the only truly strong women I've ever known in my life, cried on my shoulder, I knew that it was up to me to be the strong one for once. That moment was permanently life-changing. During this time, my uncle, also on my mother's side, was always in contact with me. We would talk all the time about cars and all the other things we were interested in, and eventually he came on hard times and moved in with my grandmother and I. He taught me something else, more on him later. It was also during this time that my parents were going through marital problems, mostly caused by my mother's infidelity and general psychotic nature. She got involved with the drugs, the UGs, in the late 80s and early 90s. Well, no one ever got involved in the drugs in the 80s. That's just
so it was meth and dicks?
method.
Literally meth and dicks.
Usually booger sugar off of a public toilet seat.
Wasn't it crack back then? Yeah, there was a lot of crack.
Oh,
and
crack.
Speed, right?
Is this a 5 o'clock free crack giveaway? She was shot because of her drug habit and, in parentheses, unfortunately, survived. In the early 2000s, right around the time my grandfather died, my father had his fill of the drama and filed for divorce. That's when he became involved with a group of shady individuals who introduced him to drugs.
Oh, Jesus.
There's no getting away from it. To his credit, he was never absent for any length of time. He'd always stop by on the weekends or whenever he was needed for something. He'd never say no to anybody who needed his help. In hindsight, this pathologically altruistic nature was his undoing. Fast forward to 2017, he gets laid off from his job. Never told us why, but he seems ashamed of it. It was around this time we noticed that his nose was starting to get bulbous and red. We told him to see a doctor because he's had skin cancer in the past, but he didn't want to go for whatever reason. 4 years go by. This is just a typical dude thing before he finally goes to see a doctor. And in that time, his nose developed, don't drink anything, Pop, a massive pus-filled sore that stunk of death.
God damn!
Which spread from the top of his nose to his upper lip.
Oh.
It was the cancer. And the doctors determined that it had spread into the bone and needed to operate as soon as possible in order to save his life. By the time they were done, they had amputated his nose, most of his sinus cavity, his upper lip, and in their place was a massive skin and bone graft to try to reconstruct his face, in quotes. Couldn't talk, couldn't write since they took the bone from his arm, and I was the only one who visited him in the hospital. I was the only person who actually cared about him. At least they let me visit him despite not being jabbed. During the time he was in the hospital, the grandmother who raised me and I lived with succumbed to her COPD. Hearing about the loss crushed his already low morale. After he left the hospital, he went back to live with his mother to take care of her since she had a stroke, and I would visit him every day for 10 months to set him up on a small pump that pushed protein shakes directly into his stomach, and also to administer eye medications for him. He didn't even try to take care of himself. He slept on an air mattress in the dining room that he would get bloody boogers on from his gaping face wound, would piss into a vase, spill it on the floor, and I'd have to clean it up.
Damn.
That's harsh.
It is. If that didn't happen, he would dump it into the kitchen sink. I would get bitched at by my cousin constantly for the things he did in my absence, and she constantly threatened to kick him out and leave him to me. Yeah, but see, women, even when they're married to you, have never been good at that whole sickness and health thing.
Nope.
At least not
Nope.
modern ladies. Well, eventually, my biological mother finally died in November of 2021, followed shortly thereafter by my paternal grandfather, and the house went to his brother. My cousin moved to Texas, and my dad had nowhere else to go, so he came to live with me. I didn't want to send him to hospice, but given how he treated that house, I feared for what he would do to my home. Well, after a few months of enduring him getting bloody boogers everywhere out of his open face wound, leaving messes for me to clean up, refusing to look for his own housing, and under the pressure of my brother and my girlfriend at the time, all admittedly worried about my mental health, I finally made the decision to kick him out. He went with the people who got him involved in drugs, and a few months later, in early 2022, on my friggin' birthday, the police showed up at my door to tell me that he had passed away in a shady, cheap hotel room. Then I found out during my investigation of what happened, because the police don't care, that they were taking advantage of him from the start. And when the money ran out, the reason he never went to get treatment in the first place, they abandoned him. When I kicked him out, he had saved some money up, so suddenly he was cool again. When he died, they rolled him and took everything he had. I was at least able to retrieve his car and his money from the bank, but that's beside the point. Everybody tells me that I did everything that I could and that I did the right thing by kicking him out, but it doesn't feel that way deep down, and I'm never going to not regret doing it.
Stand by. Stand by. All right, look, bro. This is what you need to do. You need to go in the bathroom, take a good look at yourself, and see if you actually have an S on your chest or a bat or some shit. You're not a fucking superhuman person. You can't save everyone. All right? You have to accept that. You're a human being like everyone else.
Yep.
And you cannot bear the cross of shame or guilt for this individual because he got hooked up in drugs and he didn't take care of himself and he refused to, do other things that were hygienic. Got it. But don't bear that cross of guilt for the rest of your goddamn life, because it only gets heavier the longer you carry it, and it will grind you into the fucking dust. Trust me. All right, I'm sorry.
He did a lot for him, and there's only so much that you can do for someone who is already checked out up here.
Right.
Yeah.
If there's no will.
Yeah. If there's no way to live, then they're just waiting to check out. It is.
I write about it in my book. No one heals you but you.
Exactly. Now, back to my uncle, the antithesis to my father. He was a fiercely independent man who was no stranger to pain and suffering. He was morbidly obese, had sleep apnea so bad that he'd fall asleep in the middle of a sentence due to lack of good sleep. He was hypoglycemic also, and had a bunch of other mounting health problems that seemed like God was telling him to just cash it in early. Well, being the kind of man my uncle was, he told God that he could sit his ass down and wait for him until he was good and ready.
I like it.
Eventually, his kidneys failed in 98, and after nearly dying to the toxins built up in his system, he, like my grandfather, was relegated to a remainder of lifetime on dialysis. The difference between him and his father was that his take on suffering was different than that of my grandparents. Though he did suffer with dignity, he learned that comedy is the best medicine.
Oh, yes, it is.
Yes, it is. In the early 2010s, he had his leg amputated because of an infection that went all the way down to his bone. When he recovered, he told everyone that he was a pirate and that he'd stick his prosthetic up their ass if they pissed him off. Well, it's either that or put on guy liner and talk like a fruit. I would prefer the former. It's bad news. And then you wind up with a chick who shits your bed. It's not good.
Yeah, you don't need that.
No.
Ugh. While he was on dialysis, he suffered regular infections, most of which nearly claimed his life. Lost all of his teeth, suffered from neuropathy, and had to suffer through many stupid doctors who nearly killed him had he not done research himself on everything that was going on with him. Medical treatment, third leading cause of death.
Yes, it is.
He made light of it all. He would always tell me to never give up, that survival is a mentality. When you give up, you not only doom yourself to an earlier death than you otherwise would suffer, but you also hurt everyone around you. You hurt the morale of your family and make them more likely to give up too. Giving up to him was unforgivable. You can see why I chose this story.
Mm-hmm.
The average life expectancy for a person on dialysis in his condition is on the high end, about 5 years.
I was going to say 7.
He lasted 20 fucking years.
Ooh.
Going to dialysis for 8 hours a day, 3 days a week, getting his blood sucked by vampires. He was finally convinced to shuffle off the mortal coil in February of 2018 after a massive staph infection he got from a routine surgery done on his thyroid, which is kind of funny in its own right because he actually was morbidly obese because of his thyroid. And it wasn't just one of the dozens of medications that he was on to keep him alive. The last thing I ever told him before we left the hospital the day before he died, he didn't want us to visit because he was afraid he would give us what he had, and we went anyway, was that he was strong and he would make it through this like he had everything else. When I was going through his things, I found a poem which I will put at the end of this email.
All
Hopefully
right.
it helps somebody else out like it's helped me out. Now for the punchline. Something else my uncle taught me is that survival isn't just about waking up every day resigning yourself to simply exist another day. Survival is a mentality, a fighting mentality. If you don't at least have a little bit of piss and vinegar in you and know how to laugh at life's most miserable shit, life is going to suck way more than it needs to.
Yeah.
Sometimes knocking someone down a peg or two when they deserve it is just what the doctor ordered. During the latter part of the 2010s and early 2020s, I had an on-again, off-again love interest. She lives a couple of blocks from my house, and I went to high school with her. She had a couple of kids and was a nurse making some pretty substantial money and didn't really need me for financial support. But we were both preppers, and we figured if things go south, maybe we can rely on one another. That actually seems like a pretty healthy mentality.
Mm.
We enjoyed each other's company, too, sing together by the campfire, throw a few back, went through tough times together. She lost her father to a sudden heart attack and had to clean up his apartment after he'd been marinating in it for a few days. Oh,
That's rough.
that is not a job I would wish on anybody, even
That's
the
rough.
professionals.
That's,
around
yeah.
them. No. She saw her stepfather literally lose his sanity while her mother tried to swindle him out of his own house. All sorts of drama on her end, as well as the stuff I told you about happening on my end. It felt like for a while we could really lean on one another for support. Well, turns out she's a single mom for a reason.
Yeah.
Oh, God.
There we go.
During the
Mhm.
beginning of the pandemic, she and I didn't see each other often because neither of us were really sure what to expect from the Rona. Or the Yahoo, if you're watching. My grandmother was still alive, and I lived with her in her house, figuring she sacrificed her golden years to raise me, so I'd sacrifice to take care of her in her hour of need. Due to her COPD, I did everything I could to protect her, which included staying away from this girl because she worked in a hospital with patients daily. Makes sense.
Yeah.
Well, wouldn't you know it, she found somebody else. I was pissed. She didn't get why because, well, women. Eventually, the universe did its thing, and this dude ended up being abusive towards her and her kids, so she kicked him out. A few months go by, we make amends. She starts doing the travel nurse stuff.
Sling back.
Yep. Long hours traveling from state to state while her sister and mother took care of her kids. Whenever I could, I'd stop by to help out with things, and I tried being a part of the family. After a while, I started to notice that I was the one holding up all the effort of keeping an open line of communication, and I'd go days sometimes without hearing anything. Finally, I made it a point not to be the first one to make contact and see just how long it would take her to do it herself.
Uh-huh.
A few months later of not
Mm.
hearing anything from her, I finally had enough and I confronted her about it. Ready to take a page out of my grandfather's book and burn the bridge down with napalm.
I love it.
After she threw a bunch of excuses, I'm tired. There's so much to do. I don't have time for a relationship. I don't know if I want to have another kid. I just told her, yeah, well, thanks for wasting my time just to tell me you don't have time for me. Have a nice life and go fuck yourself.
Dude.
All right.
I haven't spoken to her in over a year, and I haven't had the urge to extend an olive branch in the slightest.
Don't.
That bridge is still and will always be a smoldering pile of ashes.
Good.
Today, I'm single, never married, in my late 30s with a house, good job, enough money to live comfortably, enough supplies to ride out whatever shitstorm we've got coming our way, and a good support system of friends and family. Best part is there isn't a bitch in sight to ruin any of it. Sure, I want kids, but I haven't met a single woman in the world my age or younger worth having them with. I've learned to enjoy being alone, and comedy has helped me survive.
Outstanding.
And this is the
Perfect.
poem that his uncle kept in his wallet. And he says it gets him every time. It's called Don't Quit. When things go wrong, as they sometimes will, when the road you're trudging seems all uphill, when the funds are low and the debts are high, and you want to smile, but you have to sigh. When care is pressing you down a bit, rest if you must, but don't you quit. Life is strange with its twists and turns, and every one of us sometimes learns. And many a failure comes about when he might have won, but he stuck it out. Don't give up, though the pace seems slow. You may succeed with another blow. Success is failure turned inside out, the silver tint of the clouds of doubt. And you never can tell just how close you are. It may be near when it seems so far. So stick to the fight when you're hardest hit. It's when things seem worst that you must not quit. For all the sad words of tongue or pen, the saddest are these: it might have been.
Wow, it's a good one.
Yeah. John Greatleaf Whittier is the author of the poem. Fantastic.
All right, so his uncle didn't write that. That's somebody else.
I'm not sure. We didn't actually get the name of his uncle.
Oh, okay. That's cool. That's cool.
Damn good.
That's a
Yeah.
good one.
I like it. I like it a lot. So lots of good, lots
Dude,
of
I'm
good
so sorry for
messages
your loss,
in there.
brother, but you cannot carry that cross.
Yep.
Okay. You just can't do it. Like the worst crosses to carry in your life are guilt, shame, and regret.
Oh, yeah.
And all of them get super heavy the longer you carry them. All right. And I'm just telling you right now, it will fucking break you. So you need to leave it behind. You literally do.
Watch Grunt Speak live every Tuesday and Thursday at 8 p.m. Eastern. And if you want to join Podford supporters Sundays, go to redonkulous.com/donate and make a monthly pledge. A link is in the Meat Gazer box.